5705.
5705. But there's no reply. 5705.
Hello and welcome to the third in my series of videos about the Underlooked Bands. Why underlooked instead of overlooked? I hear you cry. Well, for me, these are the bands or artists that are mostly defunct, and they may have had some attention in their day, the odd hit single or album, tours and TV appearances, but they've since largely slipped from the public view and don't get the attention I think they deserve, hence underlooked. Now today I'll be talking about another one of those more obscure 1970s bands, British bands that I love, City Boy. They were formed in the Birmingham area of England and were active between 1974 and 1984. And today I'll be focusing mainly on the period up to 1980, which for me was their golden era. City Boy are another one of these bands that I like to call genre fluid. They're hard to pigeonhole. They could be described as art rock, and they certainly shared a strand of very English eccentric composing with elements at times of music hall, brass band and folk influences. Comparisons could be made to 10cc, Queen, even Stackridge, and also an American act like Sparks, for instance. In fact, if there was such a thing as a progressive pop rock band, then that might fit. And at the same time though, with all that, they could rock really hard, particularly on ferocious guitar-driven tracks like Dear Jean and Cigarettes, and they were not out of place touring with Thin Lizzy, which they did. And they had a future superstar producer, Robert John Mutt Lang, on board. So with him, they could produce a very sophisticated pop rock sound. They made some fantastic albums with a diverse mix of styles, strong songwriting, very tight arrangements, great vocals. They had two lead vocalists, and the vocal arrangements that the band and Mutt Lang spent a lot of time on were fantastic. And they also had a seriously underrated lead guitarist in Mike Slammer. The initial City Boy lineup came out of a long-standing school friendship of vocalist Lol Mason and vocalist and guitarist Steve Broughton, who also went by the name of Steve Lunt in later years. From 1968 onwards, they played the extensive acoustic and folk club circuit of the Midlands, where they met guitarist Chris Dunn, and then they brought in another of Lol's school friends, Max Thomas, who was also a guitarist, so a bit guitar top heavy as a foursome right now. But the folk circuit, as it did for a lot of guys, eventually lost its appeal for the foursome, and they decided in early 1974 to turn electric, with Dunn switching to bass and Thomas to keyboards. To fill up the band, they added Mike Slammer on lead guitar and Roger Kent on drums. And this is the lineup that remained intact until the release of their fifth album in 1979, apart from a drumming change with Roy Ward coming in place of Kent. They very extremely quickly got a record deal with Vertigo, but it was the securing of top producer Robert John Mutt Lang early in his career that was a bit of a masterstroke, and certainly for their sound, if not commercially in the end. And he produced those first 5 albums and became a very close de facto member of the band. Lang actually later produced major hit albums by the likes of AC/DC, Def Leppard, Foreigner, Bryan Adams, Shania Twain and Muse and many others. And although he didn't have that big commercial success with City Boy, he certainly made a huge contribution to the sound.
Look how she smiles politely, harmless as a hive full of bees. She breaks your heart 3 times nightly when you see a dwarf on a leaf.
So that's the track Deadly Delicious from the self-titled debut album by City Boy. released in 1976. And it really established that polished progressive pop rock sound that I love so much. Lots of choppy guitars and multiple guitar riffs, great tight vocal arrangements and great multi-layered vocals, great keyboard motifs, songs with a lot of lyrical storylines in them. Some hard rock mixed with some really good catchy pop melodies, a little bit of progressive leanings here, and slight folk reflection of their folk background in places, and really showed what they would be capable of in their later albums. And slightly earlier on, and I played also a little bit of the opening track of that album, Moonlight, which is a really beautiful little pop tune, and lots of interlocking different guitar riffs and very, very melodic vocals. Some of my other favourites on this album were the mini-epic Sunset Boulevard, which tells a great Hollywood-related story and has some fantastic, almost progressive rock feel to much of it. The glam rock-influenced Oddball Dance with some really great guitar play, and again 5,000 Years, another mini-epic progressive-sounding pop rock song with some fantastic lead guitar, and also the very quiet and beautiful Haymaking Time is showing the folk roots and acoustic roots of the band, with again a really nice story and lyric to it. The album sold a few copies in the US, kind of reached the bottom parts of the Billboard Top 200 albums, and they also had a flirtation with the UK singles charts with the single from the album The Hapkido Kid.
I know you like your liquor sweet and sour. Watch out, he don't need no pistol in his hand. Watch out, so much bread and twice as many fans. Watch out, he scowls at you and it chops you down. Watch out, he's the seventh son of the whole seventh land.
The very quirky Hapkido Kid City Boy single, which reached the bottom reaches of the British Top 40, and Hapkido being, I believe, a Korean martial art, so a little bit of a quirky lyric and sound, very reminiscent perhaps of 10cc in some ways, a very funky little song, very nice indeed, and unusual in for them, in that they did manage to get on to Top of the Pops. And for those from North America and other parts of the world that don't know, Top of the Pops is the long-running British chart show. It was on for decades and typically was featured acts miming to their pre-recorded versions of their songs live on the show. But City Boy were the first band ever to actually play live on the show itself on the night, which was a bit of a nightmare for them when there was sound check, etc., but they managed to do extremely well nonetheless. The band were quick to get back in the studio in 1976 to make their second album, Dinner at the Ritz, and this album gained them a lot of really good reviews. For instance, the NME called it a masterwork, compared them to Lennon and McCartney, Ian Fleming and Noel Coward, and clearly they were aiming for a very English, very quirky style on this album. Don't want to give you the impression though that this is some kind of light whimsical album. It's very definitely a rock album with some really fantastic riffs and hooks, a lot of guitar work, a lot of heavy stuff, and possibly even their heaviest rock album. And you know, there's certainly nothing faint about it. There are lyrically, I think, it's where the English quirkiness comes in, and a little bit of Bonzo Dog Doodah Band and Verstanchel on Dinner at the Ritz itself, but it's very much a rock album. It features some of my favourite rockers of theirs. And also, when I'm talking about the tracks on this particular album, you know, I may make comparisons to bands like Queen or NCC, Foreigner, or even monetarily, but these are not meant to be in any way disparaging City Boy. They're very much not pastiche artists or copyists. Very, very much have their own sound. It's just that they have those who've never heard them a sonic idea of where they're at. And in fact, in this album in particular, I could have heard several of these tracks on mid-70s Queen albums, and they would have fitted extremely well and would have been beloved if they'd happened to be by that band. Certainly no way are they copies though. This is just to give you an idea of what the feel of the album is like sonically. So let's take a look at the tracks on Dinner at the Ritz, which is one of my all-time favourite albums, I have to say. Lyrics are absolutely fantastic throughout. First off was Mama's Boy, which was a mid-paced rocker, some really tight riffs. Then Walk on the Water, super catchy lead vocal and guitar hooks on this, bit of a glam rock sound. Narcissus, which was a really spooky, slow-burning, bluesy rocker. Could easily, as I say, have been on a Queen album, and some fantastic, strong keyboards from Max Thomas. And some of the production work in this, you can hear later on Mutt Lange's production with groups like Def Leppard. You can hear him forming that sound on here. Then the title track, Dinner at the Ritz, which featured guest performances from Pete Hamill and others from Van der Graaf Generator. It kind of mixed a Noel Coward and Viv Stanchel oddball lyric with the trademark City Boy lead guitar, rock licks, and a fantastic chorus line sing-along outro, which I believe went down a Storm Live. Then there was Goodbye Blue Monday, a bit of a prog rock keyboard outing mixed with a Status Quo type boogie, another great rocker. And then The Violin, which was an absolutely beautiful story of a lonely old lady recalling her violin virtuoso playing a lover who's long gone. An absolutely gorgeous song with some fantastic instrumentals. And then finally, one of the mini epics the band liked to do, State Secrets, which was a bit of a satire on secret agent stories, in 3 parts. Some fantastic riffs again, the Peter Gunn bass line at points, and some fantastic guitar and keyboard interchanges in the last section. So all in all, an extremely satisfying album. Unfortunately for the band, didn't sell well commercially, but musically extremely strong. And so City Boy moved on in search of that elusive hit album. So their next album in 1977, Young Men Gone West, moved a little away from that more progressive leanings on their first couple of albums, and they went for a more focused grouping of straightforward rock and pop tunes, and this resulted in one of my favourite albums of all time.
Young men gone west for a city room. Young men gone west for that gin and vermouth. Young men gone west, it's young men for the boys, leaving the nest for their jewels and toys. Young men gone west from unhappy homes, leading the way for
The title track from Young Men Gone West, it's a beautiful, sweeping, romantic sound that City Boy could get in some of their tracks. Great lyrics, really chorus that embeds itself in your mind, and I really liked the way the band were playing in this album. They were really tight, the tunes were fantastic, and they were able to come up with such a varied set of tunes and sounds that I think there was something in here. There was something in here for everybody. We have the acoustic guitar driven Bordello Night to elicit things going on south of the border. Then there's the beautiful calypso driven She's Got Style with some really great guitar riffs, brilliant vocals as usual. They've also got tracks like I've Been Spun, another great pop tune, The Runaround, which is a fantastic jangly guitar pop song which would have been a huge hit for a number of bands, and should have been. And then there's One After Two, which has got a beautiful, languid, jazzy sound. Once again, those fabulous guitars and the fabulous vocals. As well as all these fantastic pop tunes, the album has got plenty of great rockers too. Some of the best ones the band did. There's a raunchy Bad for Business, which I don't think would have been out of place at a Queen album, with its gritty guitars, fantastic piano piece, great hooks. And then there's the slightly more bonkers The Man Who Ate His Car, which features the all-time classic line Mechanic in a Panic. And the band really rocked out on these fantastic tracks. And the band also featured on this album one of my all-time favourite tracks of theirs, rock tracks, the track Dear Jean, I'm Nervous. Then to finish the album off was one of my all-time favourite songs by any band, the track Millionaire, which, as well as featuring it, beautiful, romantic, and I don't mean romantic love, but more the classic idea of a romance, sweeping vistas, etc. This track, as well as that, and a great vocal, fantastic chorus, had a really great arrangement for brass band and orchestra. So a great way to finish the album off.
And as the sand runs from the glass, and they whisper, gonna live, and the shadows come and go, but never pass. Oh, bad times never last when you're a millionaire. A millionaire. 'Cause you're a millionaire, you've got plenty to spare, all the time in the world to go anywhere. If you lose it all, would you really care? Would it bruise you? 'Cause it's a masquerade in many ways. It's like wearing shades on a cloudy day. It don't make the weather change, but it fools you that you're a millionaire. You've got plenty to spare, all the time in the world to go anywhere. If you lose it all, would you really care? Would it bruise you? 'Cause it's a masquerade in many ways.
So Young Men Gone West, a magnificent album, but yet again not a commercial success. However, the band would move on to their next album, Book Early, which actually finally gained them some of the commercial success.
Someone's phoning for a dedication, that's fine.
5705, but there's no reply. 5705,
5705, the lead single and lead-off track from the 1978 album Book Early, and this finally gave City Boy the hit single they were seeking, reaching the top 10 in Britain, the top 30 in the US, and was a big hit all over Europe. And it kind of distilled the entire City Boy sound into one 3-minute single. Great vocals, great lyrics, fantastic guitar and keyboard hooks with Roy Ward now in the drum seat, some really crisp drumming, and for me a fantastic bass line from Chris Dunn that really anchored the whole thing. And so this got the album off to a great start and promoted it really well. Curiously enough, there's a version of that song out there under the title Turn On To Jesus with a completely different lyric. You can find it on YouTube, but the band completely reworked it as 5705 in order to get a hit. The album produced a second minor hit single in the track What a Night, although in a sense the track was not from the album, it was added to the album after it became a minor hit and been recorded a few years beforehand, and earlier copies of the album didn't have it. But adding it in it's kind of rounded out the album a little well, so I wasn't too upset with that. The minor hit single What a Night, which was added back into the Book Early album after becoming a hit. And this, again, like Young Men Going West, was a great focused collection of pop and rock songs in this album. Honed their City Boy skills with the great lyrics, very complex vocal arrangements, fantastic guitar and keyboard riffs, thumping bass and drums, all played very tightly. And on this, some of the standouts in this album were the rockers, Do What You Do well, Moving in Circles. There's a really great romantic ballad in Goodbye Lorelei, that sweeping romantic sound they could do so well. Summer in the Schoolyard, a real drum and guitar tour de force, sort of homage to the summer of '63, the Beatles' summer. And a possible return to more progressive rock sound on the final track, Dangerous Ground, which perhaps indicated where the band were going to go next again. But I guess my favourite track on the album, and perhaps my favourite City Boy track of all time, is the fast-paced, almost ferocious rocker Cigarettes. My favourite, possibly, City Boy track, Cigarettes, from the album Book Early, which did give the band some commercial success globally, and particularly in the UK and the US. And with the switch of US label to Atlantic Records in 1979, the band returned to a more progressive rock sound and a harder rock sound with their next album, The Day the Earth Caught Fire.
At the third stroke, it will be 3 o'clock. Precisely.
Outside, the world was left.
Epic title track from the album, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. A science fiction inspired tale of apocalyptic destruction, just how I like them. This was some of the band's hardest rock, and indeed this album marked a return to a more progressive rock style with a science fiction and futuristic theme through the album and a much harder edged rock sound throughout. Some of the standouts were the bluesy bass heavy track It's Only the End of the World, which actually featured Huey Lewis on harp. Other standouts were Modern Love Affair with the great catchy chorus and the choppy guitars and slinky riffs of Machines, and then the 12-minute song cycle Ambition, which was a fitting closer to a great album, in fact to a great run of albums. So following this album, which didn't do as well commercially as hoped, internal tensions in the band led to Broughton and Dunn leaving. The remaining foursome made two more very creditable albums, Heads Are Rolling and It's Personal, but lack of commercial success and record company issues resulting led them to call it a day in 1982. But in their short career, City Boy made some of my favourite albums and some of my favourite songs of all time, and to me they are truly an underlooked band. I'm going to be making a short follow-up video to outline what the individual band members did following the breakup, as there was some interesting stuff in there. But till then, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please check out my other stuff, and please hit subscribe and click the bell for notifications. I will be back with another Underlooked band soon, so till then, stay well and keep on rocking.